Afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you, and thank you all for attending today. So today, I'm very excited to be here and to facilitate this talk within the GLA, celebrating its Black History Month, winning at the intersection. But it's also the year that hip hop is celebrating its 50th year, and it has been a major force in Black culture and the art movement, created and introduced by African Americans and Latinos. Today's talk will focus on hip hop and the intersectionality of race and cultural appropriation with DJ Amir, a rare breed of music lover, equally part historian, artist, DJ, and music exec. Amir, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, what's up, man? Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to do this. As he said, my name is DJ Amir. I'm originally from Boston via Brooklyn. I now live in Berlin. I've been a DJ for more than 30 years, record label owner, compilation compiler, just everything to do with music, I've had my hands in. So, hip hop especially.
Okay, so we're going to take it back right to the beginning, some 50 years ago, about its origins. And we've got a nice little video for you, which we're going to play. Okay, so Amir, what was your first memory of hip hop and what track had an impact on you growing up?
Um, well, my first memory of hip hop, and then not just even with music, was just I always tell this story, one day I was on the school bus, we were all on the school bus listening to the radio that the bus driver was playing, and Rapper's Delight came on. And while we were all screaming and yelling and whatever, we all stopped. because we had never heard anything like that before. And it just blew me away. I was kind of like, we all knew the song Good Times, so that immediately affected us. But you know, that was the first time that I ever heard like actual hip hop music, not knowing that when I used to see people breakdancing and the graffiti in my neighborhood, that was also a part of hip hop, but we didn't call it hip hop. It was just something that we saw every day in the neighborhood. The song that really made me pay attention to hip hop even more was the song by Melly Mel, The Message. Because I was like, finally, somebody's talking about what is going on around me. Because what you guys call council flats, I grew up in the projects. So, you know, like rats in the front room, roaches in the back, that was like reality for me. Broken glass everywhere, that was reality to me. So it was like, finally, I have somebody that's talking about what I'm going through, what people around me are going through. So I was like, this is my music. My father had jazz, my mother had gospel and all that other stuff. And my brothers and sisters, they had disco. I kind of had it a little too. But hip hop was my thing that I could say, yeah, I discovered this in my life and I'm gonna latch on to this.
Okay, okay. That's that's really interesting because where did you grow up and where were you born, I suppose?
I was born in Boston. I grew up in
Okay.
Boston, Massachusetts. And you know, I grew up in a section called Dorchester. A lot of these names are names of places over here, but you know, so I grew up in the projects in Dorchester. And you know, this was like, we didn't call it hip hop back then, but not knowing that's what was around us. You know, like I said,
Right.
the graffiti, the breakdancing. You know, I had a cousin that was a DJ. He used to come out in the parks and they used to plug in, you know, the turntables into the lamppost, you know, outside. You know, all of that stuff was going on in the Bronx, but I had no idea until I started hearing Grandmaster Flash and, you know, Melly Mel and everybody else talking about the same things that we were doing, you know.
Okay. So with that in mind, I'm trying to just chart like a young Amir, him deciding he's going to be a DJ, him deciding that he's going to work in the record industry. Talk us through what that journey meant for you.
Well, I started off as a record collector first, and I think
Okay.
most DJs, if you talk to like, you know, Jazzy Jeff, you know, any of these DJs, they all started off as record collectors because back then you had to have the knowledge of music first before you can say, I'm gonna go out and DJ, whether it's for your aunt or for 300 people. You know what I mean? So like, for me, I started off as a record collector, and it just to me was just a natural progression to be a DJ. You know what I mean? To play these tunes, because I'm not just wanting to play those tunes for myself or just for my family members. I actually want to go out and play this music that I discovered, you know what I mean? And for other people. And so that's really how I decided to be a DJ, because I wanted to share my love of music. You know what I
Okay.
mean? That's just as simple as that, you know? And into the record industry, that was by accident, to be honest with you, because I moved to New York in 1995 because I got accepted to the New School for Social Research to be I was a PhD candidate for sociology. I moved there, and about 2 years into me into the program, I was like, this is not what I want to do. And hip hop was still like thriving in New York City, and I had two roommates that kind of went on to become well-known producers, and so everybody was coming to our house, and I was like, I can't read about Marx and Durkheim and Weber and all this other stuff anymore when these guys are in there rapping and tapping out beats. And so I decided, you know, I quit grad school to the chagrin of my parents, but you know, I felt like music was my path, and somehow I found my way into the music industry from there, and I just never looked back.
Okay. So once you're into the industry, you've kind of pivoted in between two eras, which we'll kind of go on to, which is really what the next part of this talk will be about. It's about the rise of hip hop. So we've kind of already spoken about its origins, but there are a number of distinctive eras that I'd like you to kind of walk us through, the
Okay.
audience. And I suppose we're going to play a game. I want
Okay.
you to define one or two key moments within these next eras. So
Okay.
this is a visual, an infographic that was created by a lady called Taylor Harris, who's a hip hop aficionado. And she speaks about the years of the old school, the golden age, the move to mainstream, and the new millennium, and obviously now. Could
Right.
you kind of just, I think we've spoken about the old school, but could you just
Right.
name just a few key points or highlights within each era, I suppose?
I mean, well, in the old school era, it's funny because a lot of the DJs, a lot of the groups, they didn't get along with the disco cats. So, everybody that was at Larry Levan's parties and stuff like that, there was like a split between the two DJ crowds and between hip hop and that crowd. But the funny thing is that a lot of the hip hop records, specifically Rappers Delight, they're rapping over disco.
Mhm.
So you can't, it's not like you don't like disco, you know what I mean? So like there was this divide. So like in that era, this is way before sampling. This is way before Marley Marl, the inventor of sampling in hip hop, started doing his thing. So it was all about that. It was like dressing up like how Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force used to dress with the weird outfits and different things like that. Then Run DMC came in and they started doing the leather, the Adidas with no laces, with the hats and stuff like that. So it started becoming, what, we're going to create something different. So for me in that era, it was still fresh and new. Hip hop was just like an infant, still trying to find his legs, just still trying to walk. You know what I mean? In a sense. And so like graffiti was still like on and popping, even though like Mayor Koch, who was the mayor of New York City, was really trying to shut down all of that. So that to me is that era, the old school era. The golden age is when Marley Marl comes in, he invents sampling. People are talking about more than just partying and girls and stuff like that. People are starting to talk about what's going on in their neighborhoods, what's happening, in the world. People are really starting to dig for records, besides just James Brown, because James Brown is a really huge influence in hip hop. I mean, so many people have sampled, they basically gave him a second career, a second life,
I
to be
agree.
honest, right? So people are starting to like talk about different things within this era also, like with the group like Stetsasonic, they were some of the first people to actually really introduce jazz into hip hop. So you get this elements of other people trying to like sample other forms of music that we all are like, influenced by. And then also within this era is the Black Power movement. This is when Public Enemy, X Clan, KRS One, Rakim, all of them, Big Daddy Kane, they started bringing in the Black consciousness in the movement as well. Then the move to the mainstream is just like, um, for me, when NWA made the album with Fuck the Police on it, and started talking about what it was like on the West Coast, that was one of the first albums that actually went platinum, was very successful. So major labels started saying, okay, there's actually money in this genre of music. How can we get in on that? How can we get a slice of the pie, or actually the whole pie? You know what I mean? And so that's what happened with that and the move to mainstream. And then you also have Puff Daddy coming in with the whole Jiggy movement. You have Biggie and Tupac, that whole era, the West Coast, East Coast thing. Again, hip hop music starts to become basically the number one selling genre of music in the world by the late 90s. You know what I mean? And then the new millennium is just basically, you have other offshoots of hip hop, drill, trap, grime, I believe, probably, all these other different kinds of, people are starting to branch out. And also, hip hop is not just the East Coast and the West Coast now. Southern rap explodes. you know what I mean, explodes on the map. And so all these other different areas of the country in America start making their own version of hip hop. That's what I would say.
Okay then. And do you think the majority of Black and brown folk that created the cultural movement control the economic and social narrative?
Nowadays, I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all because, well, for one, you know, as I always say to people, it's easy to start your own record label. As hard as it is easier to start your own record label. What the hard part is getting distribution, getting your records out there to the masses. The three record labels and distribution networks that control the industry, the worldwide industry right now, are Sony, Universal, and a little bit of EMI. So you have to go through them if you want that. And then it's, for the streaming, it's Spotify and, iTunes or Apple Music.
Mm.
So we don't control any of those networks. Even within the labels that are out there, Def Jam and um, some of the other, other labels like that, they are now run or owned by Universal. So those are not even ours anymore. They started off as ours, but then they were sold and now they're in the control of someone else. We don't control the messaging in hip hop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't control any of the messaging. We don't control any of the economics of hip hop. It's sad to see like Kool Herc is like, at one point in time he was homeless.
Wow.
You know what I mean? This is a pioneer. This is where like, I love Jay-Z and the rest of them just as much as anybody else. But I mean, or Dr. Dre, you're a billionaire. You can't help this person out who gave you a career, who
This is
put you in
true.
place to be able to make these billions. You know what I mean? And I'm sure like Herc is not the type of person that's going to be like coming with his hands out, being like, please, can you help me? But this is what I'm talking about. Like, we need these kind of situations to happen for our pioneers in this genre of music, and it's just not happening.
Yeah.
So
The other thing I wanted to ask you is that, just looking at this era, just is that I suppose it's be interesting to hear your views on the 1989 first hip hop win for
oh,
Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff, who parents don't understand, and that
mm.
not being televised in the States, right?
It was not televised. I watched that Grammys that year, so I vividly remember that, and I was pissed. We were all pissed because it's like finally we get our hour in the sunlight, but not really. You're still at the back of the bus,
Yeah.
kind of. You know what I mean? And
And
that's
what
what
do
it
you
felt like
think?
was.
And what do you think that was about? Not showing it.
Um, Honestly, I just think hip hop was not taken seriously. Okay, yeah, we won a Grammy, but it's still not taken seriously to the point where a few years later it was. Like it wasn't taken seriously like jazz music. And also I just think because honestly they were black youths from the ghetto in Philadelphia.
Yeah, because that would have been around the Reagan years, maybe.
No, that would have been in '89. That was the first George Bush senior.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so
And that
that
was
kind of
during
gives you
the
some
first
context.
Iraq War. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was around that time. But I
Okay.
mean, it's still on the tail end of the Reagan years. I mean, the Reagan years still kind of like were seeping into '89.
For sure, for sure. And I suppose through its rise, there's been a lot of, I suppose, appreciation of the genres through the decade. It's
Right.
grown steadily. It's become a a force commercially, financially. And
Mhm.
so I suppose where I'd like to move on to next is more around the theme or the understanding of cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation through a hip hop lens. How do we distinguish between the two? And can you give us some examples of where it's been done, in your opinion, well, and
Mm.
where the lines may be blurred?
Okay, so I look at cultural appreciation in the lens of hip hop as, like, someone who, first of all, loves music, understands that this is not just, a fad. This is a music form that I want to learn about, that I want to contribute in whatever which way I can, not so that I don't want to be a part of this culture so that I can go off and, exploit that culture in a way that demeans it and that brings it down. Someone that, yeah, that just adds on to the culture in a positive way. Now understands that, I am a guest at the table, but I'm going to be a polite guest at the at the table.
Right,
You know what I mean? Whereas cultural appropriation is like you have someone that comes and they have other motives for wanting to be a part of the culture. They're looking at it as at a lens of, like, how do I come out of, how do I make this into a commodity? How do I
right,
profit off of this? How do I make this something that is a part of the mainstream culture, and it to the point where you don't even recognize it anymore? I feel
right.
like someone, and you ask for examples, like, an example for me would be someone like Post Malone. Some of the younger audience, if there's any younger audience in here listening, would know Post Malone. He's from Syracuse, New York. He's had several, as they say, diamond selling singles. So he's been a very successful artist, but it's like, he to me is like a type of person that's, for lack of a better way to say it, he's like a culture vulture. He takes parts of the culture to add on to himself, to bring that clout to him, and not really appreciate the culture. Doesn't know anything about the culture except for, I know how to use what I need to make myself, to make myself famous in this culture. It's all about fame and clout and stuff like that, for him. Whereas another person that I would say who, um I believe appreciates the culture would be Macklemore. Macklemore in 2014, when he I believe he won a Grammy,
That's
um,
correct.
you know, he got some criticism from some people, but he also said that I grew up on this culture. I grew up as a guest in this culture, but I appreciate what they have done. I've tried to learn. I've tried to add on to this culture. I've tried to be respectful to this culture as much as possible, because I know this is something that, is special to the Black and Brown community, and the Black and Brown community that I grew up in. Also, like, I don't remember the name of the song, but he had a video for one of his songs that he had Grandmaster Flash, Melly Mel, Grandmaster Caz. I believe he might even have had a Herc in the video. Even some of the most successful Black artists never gave any of these guys shines in their video. Now, some
Mm.
people might say, well, he's only doing that just to further his career. I personally don't believe that. I also personally believe that Eminem is not that type of person either. I think Eminem, skill wise, it's very hard to deny his skill. For me, I mentioned earlier that my favorite MC still to this day is Rakim. When Rakim says, who to me is the goat of goats, when Rakim says that Eminem is a goat, that's enough for me.
So a goat, to those that don't know, is the greatest of all time.
Yeah, sorry.
Not the animal goat.
No, no, no. He's not a he's not a mountain goat. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's like there are people out there that you have to question their motives of why they want to be in the culture. why certain labels have wanted to be in the culture, why they, you know, because I experienced that a lot in the music industry when I was coming up. You'd have a lot. I worked around a lot of white executives who, you know, were white men or whatever. And the funny thing about them, they always try to like out hip hop each other. I'm more hip hop than you. I have a prettier black girlfriend than you. I know more about hip hop than you. And I just to sit back and like laugh inside my head because I'm like, that's not what hip hop is about. That, you know,
Right.
that, you know, like if that's what you're in it for, you're in it for the wrong reasons. And I don't trust you.
Right, I see. It's funny about cultural appropriation because it has always been there, but I think we
Mhm.
might have called it something different many years ago or many decades ago. I think from a British perspective, you know, hip hop, I think definitely has been influenced by dub toasting, which was a form of rapping that was kind of invented by those from the Caribbean that came over from the
Right,
Windrush from the 1950s and 1970s.
right.
Um, and it was really, it was in order to match the rhythm of ever increasing pace and aggression to the Jamaican influenced dub in the UK. But also, I would say in the 80s, whilst such pioneers as Hard Noise, Moni Love, Derek B, Cookie Crew
Mm-hmm.
were, you know, making strides not only in this country and in the US, there was definitely a trend for UK rappers or artists to sound like they were American in swag, attire, and style.
Mm-hmm.
Some might say that we, those artists, were not keeping it real then because that's not your experience. But some might say that that's what they were influenced by, and that's what globalization does. It does blur the lines. What are your thoughts on that?
My initial thought is that, you know, those groups that you mentioned, we're all a part of the black and brown diaspora. So like you influence us, we influence you. So like I just think that at that point in time, hip hop in the UK was just again was trying to find its legs. So, you know, if they were rapping with an American accent just to get into to us, because I remember when UK artists, when I because I would buy everything and I would buy certain UK artists and I couldn't get around my head wrapped around the UK, the English accent. And I think a lot of Americans were like that. And I think that was translated overseas here. And
Mm,
so a lot of maybe some decided we're going to rap with an American accent. I compare it to, like, for instance, New York rap was winning for a long time until the Coast came around and they decided to start talking about what they were experiencing in Compton or, you know, Oakland or whatever else. Because before that, everybody was rhyming like New Yorkers, right?
right.
Everybody was talking about, you know, and the beats and everything, the style, the swag, and all that stuff. Then here comes like NWA, and here comes Too Short, and their swag is completely different. They decided to, like, you know what, we're gonna rap about our own experiences. And I think here in the UK, the Cookie Crew or whoever else, Money Love, they decided at some point in time, we're gonna start representing our culture here. You know
Right.
what I
Yeah.
mean? So I don't take an issue with them when people try to say that they were, you know, appropriating or, you know, misrepresenting, you know, what they were going through, because I don't know where any of these people grew up. They may have grown up in similar situations, but just in a different, you know, part of the world.
This is true. I think with the globalization of hip hop, there's definitely was a trend. I'm going to call this when MTV started embracing hip hop.
Hmm.
So it was great to see how globalized language started to become. However, there was definitely some some dark times and some disrespectful times So, you know, if you kind of fast forward to kind of like the last decade with the likes of Kanye or Jay-Z,
Right.
rapping about an experience in Paris where they use the N word. And I remember actually attending that concert here in London, and there was a little child who was 8 years old who was
Mm,
white, and he was just saying it like it was nothing. And I remember
right.
just being shocked, like that meaning of what the N word has a load of hurtful and clearly negative memories and connotations, but the globalization of
Hmm.
that has changed that. And would you consider that cultural appropriation?
Yes, I would definitely consider that cultural appropriation, and all for the wrong reasons too. It's like,
Mhm.
growing up in Boston and New York, you had white kids, using the N word, like, yo, and
Yeah,
not talking to me, but talking to themselves. You know what I mean? And just the word is so loosely used right now. Like, there's so much, and it's so loosely used, and it's by so many people and so many young people. They have no idea of the history and the connotation of it. Just like a
no,
lot of things, like, it's not the same, but it's in the same vein of what we're talking about. Like the word clapback, I cringe when I hear that word, because growing up, clapback means you clapping back with a gun,
right.
right? I'm
Yeah,
clapping back like the gun is clapping, right? So
yeah.
when I hear the regular mainstream media, news, BBC, and CNN or whatever, say, and the clapback, and I'm like, oh, we don't even know where that comes from.
Yeah.
Stop using that word. This
Well, I
is what
suppose,
cultural appropriation. It just goes so far left.
right. Yeah. I would have never thought about it like that, but yes, it does have that connotation, and we're all aware that language does change, but in some of those areas, it can still be pretty triggering, particularly to some of our seniors when
Hmm.
it's used so loosely. Um, you're talking about cultural appropriation. I'd like to kind of share what I think is an example of that, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts on that actually.
Okay.
Um, so
Mm.
this is Dapper Dan, and he was a fashion designer, and he first started selling his clothes out of the back of his car in 1974. So
Hmm.
pretty much a year after hip hop had officially made its arrival, he set up a boutique, and it was a made to order model. He was a
Right.
self-taught guy, but he would style the likes of some of the names that you had mentioned previously before: Run DMC, LL Cool J, Big Daddy Kane, Salt and Pepper. So I'm sure some of those looks are really iconic, particularly with the leather looks that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so despite his high profile clientele, because he was making counterfeit uh, garments for his clients, these elite fashion brands were livid. They wanted to shut
Hmm.
him down because, one, they didn't like the idea of black people from the ghetto repping those brands, and two,
Right.
they weren't making money off it. And we kind of have to kind of think at that time there was most probably a misconception or a perception that black people couldn't sell those kinds of things, that it just wouldn't
Right.
sell, it wouldn't take off, couldn't afford it. So he had his store closed down in 1992. It was a televised moment, and
Mm.
it saw his demise, and a load of people didn't know where he was.
Right.
I would like to fast forward to 2017,
Mm-hmm.
where Gucci had basically jacked his style and put it on the runway and
Right.
not credited his style. Now, hip hop has its music, but the clothing, the swag, the expression is also a part of the culture. What
Right.
are your thoughts on this? Because Dan then went on to get himself a role at Gucci
Right.
after he kicked up this. But what are your thoughts on this particular, I suppose, scenario?
Well, to go back, I mean, what Dapper Dan was doing was, excuse me, everybody in the neighborhood loved Gucci, you know, all that other stuff, but we couldn't afford it. So instead of like, you know, boosting it or robbing it from the stores, he decided to make that kind of clothing for people in the hood that could afford it. You know, he would make special stuff for Rakim and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it was just a way of economically bringing style and fashion to the neighborhood. You know what I mean? And just using which it's like making lemonade out of nothing. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. You know, just being able to be creative. And the fact that I didn't know this, that he was self-taught, which is
Yeah.
makes it even more incredible that he was able to do all of this and didn't go to fashion school. He didn't go to FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology in New York or whatever. He did all of this on his own, which makes it incredible. And then the fact that he got shut down, we all know, like you said, you listed out why he got shut down. The fact that Gucci then goes and basically bites, or takes his design or his idea and tries to like flip it for today. It's like the pot calling the kettle black to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like one of those situations where, but see, that happens a lot in the fashion world now, because like, for instance, a lot of 90s fashions is coming back, are coming back, like baggy pants. We all used to wear baggy pants back in the days in the hood. Now all that's coming back. People are also interested in the golden era of hip hop and in all the fashion that we had back then, rugbies and this and that and the other. The same situation went on with, which a lot of people don't understand, with Grand Puba and Tom Hilfiger. Grand Puba was talking about Tom Hilfiger, my Hilfiger, knapsack on the back, so much that a lot of us started switching from Polo to Hilfiger. Hilfiger started making so much money that he actually, now Puba has a lifetime. He gets a percentage of the money that Hilfiger makes because he made him so much money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So this is not a new phenomenon that has happened to Dapper Dan. I just think, it's great that they hired him as the creative director. I think it is that he is.
Right.
But I just wish that more Black designers could have the same level of recognition as a Gucci at these shows. Like, instead of just the House of Gucci, it could be the House of Dapper Dan, his own brand, his own thing,
I
on the same
agree.
level as them. This
I
is what I was
agree.
talking about before, of us not having control of the economic narrative or the social narrative.
Yeah. And it has been said that the role that he has as a creative director, and he does deserve to be that. I'm not saying that at all, but it was
Mm,
almost done to, it could be perceived, but it was done to kind of silence him.
right.
And so you take that role. But I suppose brands change and we learn. And I suppose in some respects, we've got to be forgiven potentially,
Mm,
or is it that we just evolve? But I think apologies, sincere apologies and acknowledgement
mm.
could take away a load of that pain and frustration.
Yes, if they're sincere, you know what I mean?
Yeah, if they're
That,
sincere. If they're not,
yeah,
then
the
don't
thing,
bother.
yeah, and, and somebody said, and people have bills to pay. True indeed, people have bills to pay. But the thing about all of that is that you don't want to be in a situation when you're chasing the dollar, because a lot of these big companies, they know a lot of us are chasing the dollar, chasing short, at what I call short money. Because at the end of the day, if you can, like really build something on your own, because there have been people that have done it. I wasn't the biggest fan of his clothing line, but Fubu, you know what I mean? That Carl Kanai, there were certain people that were able to do it. I was, like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of their clothing, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Have control of your own narrative and not chasing the dollar all the time. you know, is well worth it, man.
For sure. We're kind of coming up to 45 minutes in. I suppose, Letitia, Doug, do you want to usher any questions over from Amir?
Okay, I want to say thank you. That's really, really informative. And I'm sitting here thinking there's so many parallels to be drawn with what's happened in the United States and here. One of the things I thought about when we're talking about cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation was the whole Dapper Dan situation, was him appreciating Gucci and raising the profile of Gucci at a local level, and then Gucci appropriating it back without truly appreciating Dapper Dan. And that's just a spin on words. You mentioned the point about we don't have control over the messaging in hip hop.
Right.
When did that stop? Because at the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about the fact that it was almost the CNN for Black African Americans, the narrative. So when did we lose the messaging?
Well, we lost the messaging when money came into hip hop. When you had certain A&Rs and certain people at labels saying, no, that's not gonna make money. You need to rhyme like this, or you need to have an image like this. I've literally have seen that myself. I've seen that conversation with white A&Rs and Black artists and brown artists saying that you need to change your image. Because I think you can, or change your lyrics. You can make more money this way. When that and again, people, like somebody said before, people have to pay bills, and a lot of times, a lot of these hip hop artists never have seen like $5,000, $10,000, whatever kind of advance they were getting. They've never seen that money in their life. So you're gonna give me $10,000 and I have to just rhyme like this, not thinking the long-term effect of that, what's gonna happen, and that sooner or later, over time, the message gets watered down more and more and more and more, because all you're doing is chasing a dollar now. Instead of, it's not about the CNN anymore. CNN isn't even CNN anymore when it first came around.
CNN isn't even CNN anymore. Yeah, trust me on that one. So
there it is.
Jackie asked, what do you think the difference is between a rapper and an MC?
A rapper is something, like what I'll answer like Karis one answered a long time ago. He said, rap is something you do, hip hop is something rap is something you do, hip hop is something you live. A rapper is just, I get a mic, I'm rapping, that's just like, it's like my vocation. And a true MC is a lyricist. He's thinking about the lyrics. It's his passion. That's what I would say the difference is.
Yeah, it sounds to me like an MC is intrinsically linked to the messaging still.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Another question is, in terms of Jay-Z and P. Diddy, who've made money, what have they really done for hip hop?
Wow, that's a good question. I know there's an argument now. People are trying to make and putting Diddy as like the newer version of Barry Gordy, because of what he did with his artists, with the locks and everybody else, making them wear shiny suits and cleaning up their image, and trying to, get them to really, he knew how to make pop records. He knew how to get them, this group who was very raw, the Locks or Biggie, very raw, and get them to make songs that are easily accessible to the ear for the radio. But that's all I can say that for me, that P. Diddy has done. Now, Jay-Z, I know a lot of people like to point to the fact that he's made $1 billion, but how much of that is being invested in the Black community? Like I said before, there should be no reason that Kool Herc was homeless. There should be no reason that any of the pioneers are hurting. We should give, I mean, it's not, if you have $1 billion, it's not going to hurt you that much to help those people out who basically laid the foundation for you to have a career. Because as Jay-Z likes to say, you know, he was a hustler, he was a drug dealer and stuff like that. If it wasn't for hip hop, maybe you would have stayed in that lane. Who knows? You would have been in jail, dead, whatever. So you, in the fact, owe them a lot. But they're not, you know, they, whether it's pride or whatever, they're not coming to you with their hands out saying, please give to me. But I think that you should pay back. So I don't know if that answers it.
Good. I saw a documentary at the weekend about women in hip hop.
Okay.
And it featured a whole range of them. They went as far back as Millie Jackson.
Okay.
Coming all the way through to Lil Kim, etc. There were 4 white women that were featured in that.
Okay.
And they were all on the business end, the A&R element.
Okay.
Do you think that would have been a strategic approach taken on behalf of people like Def Jam?
To have a woman, a white woman as an executive? Yes and no. I mean, I don't, you know, for instance, I know it like Tommy Boy Records, you know, for De La Soul and a bunch of other, you know, big groups. Monica Lynch was the big person there that was signing a lot of different people. I knew some of these women. Yeah, it could have been strategic, but in some cases, I think those women actually, you know, bust their ass more than usual to get into those positions. So that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one because again, the music industry has and is a male-dominated industry. You know,
I just thought it was
there's
really
no black
interesting.
women. There's not a lot of black women in there.
Yeah, and I thought
There
it
was
was really...
Sylvia Robinson, right? Who set up Sugar Hill Gang, Sugar Hill Records, I mean. But I don't feel she often gets her flowers.
No, she doesn't. She's one of the few. I mean, I can't really think of any. I mean, you know, she had to deal with a lot of sharks because a lot of the, you know, the labels back then, whether they were independent or sometimes, you know, majors, were mafia owned. So you're dealing with people, you know, who are sharks in the first place. You know, so as a black woman, you had to go through triple what everybody else had to go through.
And so kind of related to that, to the topic we're talking about, Ashvini has asked, well, the theme of our Black History Month is winning at the intersection. She says, do you think the contributions of female Black hip hop artists get enough recognition? And if not, why?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, there should be. I really just think that because number one, it's a male dominated, you know, industry, number one, still to this day, whether it's on the business side or on the entertainment side. The few women that have gotten any kind of recognition, they still don't get paid as much as their male counterparts, whether that's fee for shows or pay as an executive. You know, I mean, to me, that's just really the crux of the issue right there. It's a male dominated society. Also a lot of the women. I mean, I don't want to beat up on some of the entertainers, some of the women, but you know, there's been this criticism lately of some of these women who are in hip hop that it's just all sexualized. You know what I mean? To get to that point, whereas when there was Moni Love and there was Queen Latifah and there was, you know, Sweet Tea and they all had different messages. You know, there was a lot of different topics being discussed. There was a lot of different images in hip hop. Now it's because of the cultural appropriation and different things like that. The message, the image has become one clone.
And that
On
very
the
much
ball.
sounds like it's correlated to the economics.
Yes, exactly. It's the economics. The other images they don't sell anymore. You know,
Yeah.
they keep saying that you know the young kids they don't want to hear that. They want to hear about like how much money you make, how much how much fame you have, how many followers you have. It's all about that. It's short money. It's instant gratification, way more than it is when I was younger. You know, it's crazy. It's like on steroids now.
Okay, cool. All right. There's one more question before we wrap up. Music is an art and reflection of society. Can gangster rap be blamed for the globalization of violence in cities, or is this
No,
due to poverty alone?
no, it's it's funny because the rapper Special Ed, he was on this show in America called Drink Champs, and he specifically said that NWA was responsible for the destruction of the black community. I think that's way, way, way too far because the destruction of the black community was going on way before NWA was even formed. You know, crack, AIDS, Reaganomics. I can only speak about the American experience. I don't know what it was like here in the UK, but Reaganomics, all of that stuff was going on way before NWA was even formed. There was they're just basically highlighting the issues that were already there. Thinking that you can get rid of NWA or censor them or anything like that is not going to change the situation that black people around the world or specifically in America are going through. That that's not getting at the root issues of those.
So it's asked as a question, but I'm going to kind of make it as a comment because we're almost out of time. Where a colleague talks about things need to sell. And hip hop was that powerful. That's how come it moved away from protests towards consumerism. And it's back to what you were saying initially about losing the messaging and the whole appropriation thing. So on that note, I would like to thank Amir, DJ
Thank you.
Amir, and Kwame for an insightful, informative, and engaging conversation. And I'm going to ask everyone to come off of mute